Hey everyone, welcome to Hard Lens Media. This is our Saturday show. I'm joined here today with my co-host Paul DuPont, Daniel Lupker, and we want to thank all you viewers and subscribers for helping making this channel grow. We got a lot of sorry,
it's so exciting.
I'm so excited.
We can't even find the words.
I know. Well, here's the thing. We are working on something right now, and I cannot say too much. Paul can't say too much. Daniel can't say too much.
Mum's the word.
Yeah, mum is a word. But in order for you guys to find out, again, please make sure you're subscribed. Hit that ring bell notification because, you know, it's happening to a lot of progressive channels and independent channels where their said subscribers are being unsubscribed. So we have a lot of major announcements, so double check, triple check to make sure you're subscribed to us. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Sometime, maybe within the next few weeks, we'll be making a very big announcement for Hard Lens Media. It's going to change everything for us. I think
everything.
A lot of you guys are going to really like the news, but again, can't say too much. But
we're just going to hype it up. We're just going to keep hyping it up.
Yeah, keep on hyping it up. And we got a lot to talk about, especially on today's show. We're gonna.
I do want to make one correction. As you know, every show we do, we have show notes where you can see exactly what's being covered. And we made a last-minute switch that we didn't update. If you go to the show notes in the description, you go to number 5. Okay. We'll not be covering the U.S. Marshals. We're going to instead be covering Joe Biden making a bunch of gaffes.
We're going to Biden it up.
Yeah, when I read this story, I didn't realize it was like 2 years old. So now it's corrected. Just disclosure.
Yeah, so we're
transparent.
So we're going to be talking about Senator Bernie Sanders. We're going to be talking about climate change.
We got a really good show today. I'm really happy.
We're going to be talking about potentially Tulsi Gabbard and Steiner making it to the third debate stage. And we're going to talk about our good friend David Koch, who has passed away.
And so I want to add one thing. Lainey is actually, as usual, not going to be in chat today like she usually is. She will be at the as she puts it, one of the best Renaissance fairs in the country right now.
And I hope she's having a lot of fun.
I do too, and I'm pretty sure if you want to see that coverage, you can check it out on Thursday.
Also, real quick too, shout out to Alternate Facts, Trina Be Fine, DCK Punk, Norman Kina, Trina Be Fine, and Nshia. Basically mentioning about Delaney drawing in 11 people. Wow.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of people.
He's drawing in.
That's 10 plus 1, guys.
He's drawing in about less than half as many people as the stream is starting with right now. That's pull.
Wow. But you know what? We're grateful to have you guys here. And again,
he had numbers so low. I'm surprised Mr. Beast didn't come in and give him money for having no viewers.
Oh, I'm reminded of when Biden was saying, I've got these giant crowds. Have you seen anyone out here that has larger crowds than I do? And journalists are like, yes.
Most of them.
Yeah.
Even the smaller ones look bigger.
Yeah. Well, hey, guys, stop it, right? We're making fun of Delaney, right? 11 people is a lot, okay? 11 is a lot.
I'm sorry, his candidacy is absolutely worthy of ridicule.
I feel like 11 people attending a bake sale is a failure.
Ooh, zing.
There we go. So let's get things started off. Yesterday, I did a short line.
I just want to quote Trina Be Fine. I'm not sure if this is right or not, but it'd be really funny if it was. He paid 100 people, but only 11 showed up. That'd be funny.
They took the cash and ran. Only suckers showed up. Only those who were lame enough showed up.
They donated it to Bernie Sanders.
Ooh, that'd be hilarious there, Ray, as well.
But I think we can all now say when someone says, hey, what about Delaney? We go, what?
Who? Huh? What? Delaney? Oh, the same guy who got beat up by Tulsi Gabbard, right?
Yeah. And when it happens, I'm going to say this right now because we're basically we're going to start. But I've been saying for a while that I don't think Tulsi Gabbard's going to make the next debate stage. We'll see if we have some updated news, but I'm hearing some rumors that maybe I'm wrong. Well, I'd love being wrong on something like this.
With this again, but because that's gonna be at a little bit at the end because we'll be talking about that. I'll be leading that story.
Okay. Oh, we do have it as a story.
Yeah, it's there.
Preview.
So there we go. To be continued. But now let's get things started. So yesterday I did a short live stream, basically stating that David Koch has passed away. Now again, just so you guys get a quick reminder of who he is, but I don't think you guys do need a reminder. David Koch is part of the infamous duo, the Koch brothers, who are infamous with money in politics. They're huge donors to GOP candidates as well as centrist neoliberal Democrats as well. They've involved themselves in U.S. elections as well as individual state elections. Are basically big supporters of money in politics. And myself, Daniel, Paul, and Kira. We're all former members of Wolfpack. And, you know, one of our things before we even started Hardlands Media was getting money out of politics. And, of course, look, because of Citizens United and the McCusson's decision, we have an out-of-control oligarchy here in this country. And the Koch brothers played a major role in helping create it and keeping the system afloat. Now, David Koch passed away at the age of 79. And so I just want to kind of, I said as much as I could say during the live stream. I don't think there's anything else I can add to it. Perhaps, you know, there's some interesting consequences and repercussions that could happen with his passing away. But somebody did put a very interesting comment in that short live stream video, and that is, look, his brother's still around, and there's other people who are involved in Koch Industries. Koch Industries isn't going to stop, but perhaps maybe things might change in regards to individual state elections. Look, the Kochs have a lot of influence in Wisconsin. Who knows how future elections will look like now that one of the major donors has passed away? What does it say about their, their control over U.S. elections? I want to open the floor up to Paul and Daniel. Guys, please just add in your comments.
So I have two very short things to say. The king is dead. Long live the king. They're that wealthy. It applies. But I think that Kit's right. So it's a question of, to me, whoever fills that role, I don't think they're going to be as good. My general philosophy is, if you have the choice between someone who has placed roots down for decades and decades and decades and someone who's brand new, even if they've been training for their whole life, they're going to be less effective. And, you know, the more times a corporation goes through management and leadership, the more of a zombie corporation it has, then the more bureaucratic it is, and then the less effective it is at doing things, because they have to get, there's that iron-fisted rulership. I mean, the Koch brothers have an intelligence network in politics that's stronger than even the Republican parties. It's basically a third party. It's like a ghost party that exists in terms of the infrastructure and the paid people. So if you have someone that replaces him that's 10% less effective, at the scale they're at, that's an enormous benefit to the progressive movement. Yeah. And I wrote a tweet, and I think this kind of sums up my thought on it, is we don't really know what's going to happen next with that empire, but what is Mitch McConnell going to do without his daily dose of Coke?
Oh, there we go. Paul.
Well, I think he's still going to get his daily dose of Coke. I thought it was interesting. There was a YouGov poll that went around yesterday, I think, and that was... The question was, how significant do you think the death of David Koch is with respect to politics? A lot of people said very significant. My personal opinion is not very significant. Given the fact that the Trump tax plan has already gone through, none of that money gets repatriated into the U.S. Treasury, right? That all of that money stays in the family. And Charles and David Koch were more or less in lockstep in terms of their libertarian-leaning conservative ideology. That money still gets spent for those reasons, for those purposes. Just because one half of the brothers duo is no longer with us doesn't mean that money stops flowing. Yeah. So I don't think that David Koch's death represents a major shift in money in politics. I don't think it represents a major shift in Republican ideology. I think it's at best a footnote. Yeah. Of a once libertarian vice presidential candidate.
I will say one small thing, that I agree with that mostly. I think that what it does do is increase long-term instability of their existing goals. Because I think that maybe the next 5 years, it probably won't make a difference. But in terms of that long-term guiding line, I think this is going to deviate something that we can't predict.
Right.
But I think that really what it comes down to is the other brother has to do too much Coke as well.
I think their think tanks keep humming along as they always were, though. Yeah. Like Americans for Prosperity is going to be just fine.
It's like, that's true. Yeah, Americans for Prosperity still be there. Their networks will still be there. But so like they created those networks out of nothing over decades of building them up. And it's like you can build the Titanic, and that's fantastic, and it looks awesome, but if you don't continually steer it and you don't slow down, you're going to have to worry about icebergs.
Yes, and exactly. And I'm going to give a shout-out to somebody who, Bluebell51, says, one Koch brother dead, but the think tank lives on. And that is correct. Yes, the infrastructure is still there, but to Daniel's point, one of the captains is gone. It could crash into something. It could fail.
It just increases instability.
But
That's
here's the only way that can lead to the instability, and the only reason why I think there's potential for hope is that all of us now have a real good chance to really step up and get involved. I mean, very rarely do we see someone who has this much power pass away. This is an opening that progressives and independents cannot afford to miss. This is the time to where grassroots candidates have to step up and get involved. And perhaps maybe this 2020 election cycle might be very different. It's also important to note before we move on to Paul's story, and that is this. The Koch brothers in the Trump administration, or at least not Koch Industries in the Trump administration, have been kind of going at each other because of Trump's policies in regards to tariffs and the trade wars that he's doing with Europe and China and any other country. So there could be a serious divide in the GOP and how the GOP primary is going to turn out. I think the only real candidate that's right now challenging Trump is Bill Weld at the moment, but I mean, who knows how that's going to look?
You mean on the Republican ticket?
Yeah, on the Republican ticket. Yeah, but I mean, it's there is a chance. It's just to Paul's point and Daniel's point, there's different ways of looking at it, but this is an opportunity we cannot afford to take or miss. I
just want to say one final thing on this, that hey, those brothers did everything together, and I hope they continue.
Ooh. Bye-bye. Well,
wishing for a swift reunion.
Swift reunion indeed.
Reunion. I always think it's interesting that when talking about the Kochs, people evaluate their massive fortune collectively, right? When Forbes releases their list of wealthiest people on the planet, they listed Charles and David Koch together as being 11th, right? They're, I guess, tied for 11th richest people in the world. Do they now just attribute that wealth to Charles? Is that how that?
Well, it depends.
Is that where the flow of that money will
go?
I don't really know.
That's a good point. Like, who gets their money for because does it all go exactly? Like, who does it
probably
go to?
Stays in the family.
That's probably maybe the biggest determining factor if anything's going to change is who gets the money, because the money is the power.
But in terms of like money influencing politics, yeah, we point the finger at the Koch brothers a lot, but Sheldon Adelson is still out there. Yeah. George Soros is still out there. Major donors with huge, deep pockets are all still out there. Yeah. And our government is for sale.
It's just like, billionaires to me, I look at them the same way I look at dukes and kings in medieval Europe of their own small countries and city-states. It's like there's 100 of them out there. There's 1,000 of them out there. Of that, a few of them are very, very involved in politics. The rest are somewhat involved in politics. So, you take down one, you're still dealing with 100 others. So in the big scheme of things, I think that overall, I think Paul makes the best point that it probably won't make the biggest difference, but the Kochs are also some of the most involved of any billionaire in this type of effort. So more than not, we'll see.
All right, so here's another thing, too. Shout out to Wesley Wiles, who's been really helping us out a lot. We're getting the congressional candidates on our show, interviewing them. Thank you so much, but I'm just going to read a comment from him. Yes, swift reunion, mentioning what you said, Daniel. And then also, Khalida mentions this. Just read a tweet. Don't think Bernie Sanders is effective. He released his climate plan yesterday, and already David Koch is dead. All right, you guys.
Those things are definitely
maybe
related.
We've been looking in the wrong places.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe Bernie Sanders' tweet just went out there. It was like, saving the planet. All right, never mind.
So David Koch had been struggling with cancer. Yeah. I think pancreatic cancer,
something like that,
or prostate cancer, cancer for a very long time. So, and while his cause of death was not released, speculation is that the cancer caught up with him. Speculation.
It'd be funny if he got electrocuted or fell off something and be like, timing.
Timing.
That's a poor joke. Never mind. Well, he can't take poor jokes. They're too wealthy.
Yeah. Oh.
I recovered.
Hi-oh.
Okay.
All right. So
let's run away from that joke.
It's time to talk about Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders. What's going on, Paul?
So, it's been a little while since we've we didn't cover this earlier this week, so time to cover it now. Almost a full week ago, Bernie Sanders unveiled his criminal justice reform plan. He included in it basically all of the main things that a lot of progressives and lefty thinkers have been talking about. We want to drastically reduce the prison population. We want to ban private prisons. We want to ban the practice of civil asset forfeiture. We want to ban basically people being in jail for unable to pay bail. We want to give felons the right to vote. Did I already mention that? I don't know. There are a lot of things in here that are really great. So he says, if we stand together, we can eliminate private prisons and detention centers. No more profiteering from locking people up. He says, if we stand together, we can end the disastrous war on drugs. If we stand together, we can end cash bail. No more keeping people in jail because they're too poor. If we stand together, we can enact real police department reform and prosecute police brutality. If we stand together, there is nothing we cannot accomplish. This is great. I mean, this is a major thing that the United States needs to address and hasn't done so in a very, very long time. We have a disproportionate number of people incarcerated in this country. We have a larger prison population than China does. Not even per capita, just straight prison population is larger than China's prison population. We incarcerate 2.2 million people in this country. Mm-hmm. Why? So a lot of what Sanders talks about in his plan, he would only have the authority as president over federal prisons. But a lot of this does include incentives for state correctional facilities to come alongside that. It combats things like mandatory minimum sentencing and encouraging judges to go with maximum sentencing and things like that. War on drugs, obviously, is a major contributor to the prison population, and this addresses that as well. This is basically all of the things that we really, really want out of criminal justice reform. What I found funny, the Washington Examiner did a story on this also, and they basically said, hey, this is really good, except for that felons voting. They want to make child rapists go vote. And it's like, why do they always single out child rapists? He's not saying I specifically want to make child rapists vote. He's saying I want felons to have the ability to vote. Why do they always single out the most socially deplorable particular crime? Like that percentage of the prison population is not massive. I'm okay with people who are in prison on drug crimes voting. I'm frankly in favor of anyone who's in prison on a felony charge voting, because they are at the whim of the state. And if you completely disaffect them and completely take away their voting rights, you're dehumanizing those people who don't deserve it.
And at the same time, those same prisons get to, very much like the 3/5 compromise, get to have their prisoners that are incarcerated not vote at the same time they count towards their census report. So they're still making money off those prisoners physically being there in a government sense. But I think that the point that they always make, that they, like what Paul was saying, is because the other way of saying it is, hey, why do we want all these black people to vote? Why are they doing that? That's really the real, because it's like, look at the number of people who commit those type of serious crimes like Paul's talking about, and then compare that to people that are sitting in jail because they can't afford bail, people are sitting in jail because they smoked weed, things of that nature. You're going to have it so outside. So are we saying that because child rapists exist, that hundreds of thousands and millions of people should therefore not lose the right to vote because it's too difficult? I think I've heard Sanders' campaign talk about this enough, and they basically said, look, the second you start drawing a line on when and which American citizens can vote, where do you draw that line? We've seen in the last several hundred years of American history and policy exactly what happens. And the other thing I would make as a point is, child rapists aren't a major voting constituent. It's not that many. It's not going to flip elections.
But the Boston bomber would get to vote.
No, okay, so guys.
Oh no, all one of him. How will 300 million Americans stand up to him?
He might sway the election.
Okay, so here's
he might live in Florida.
He's like Susan Sarandon.
So here's something that we have to remember, though, guys, and that is, we've heard this time and time again, and that is, this country is a place where people can get a second chance, restart their lives over, and we've always heard these stories about people just rebuilding themselves. Well, as soon as a person does their time in jail, okay, they did their time. It's time to reintroduce them and reintegrate them into society. But if there is a system put in place that's going to deny a person to be involved, well, they're going to be put right back into the prison industrial complex. That's how this thing works. And look, there are more private prisons being built here in this country because of the influence of the prison industrial complex. They're able to profit off this, and the reason why is because it's a ridiculous war on drugs. And look at who the war on drugs impacts the most. It really impacts minority communities, African American, Latino communities, and thus there's now a whole system of free slave labor that the prison industrial complex gets to basically exploit for free. And
hey, kid, it's not free. They pay those people 11 cents an hour and then charge them $20 for maxi pads.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous. And allowing them to have the right to vote allows them to actually think that they can make an impact. Look, they have to be involved in human society. They have to be involved in our society at one point or the other. And the majority of the population that's behind bars are those who have been the victims of the war on drugs. And it's just not men. It's also women, too, that are behind bars. They have every right to be involved. And let's not also forget, too, how many women, especially in conservative states, who actually had to defend themselves by dealing with an abusive partner, or perhaps maybe having an abortion. In some states, that's illegal to do, and they are serving time behind bars. The serious crime was what? Protecting their reproductive right or protecting their own safety?
What was that person? I forget her name. I think it was out of Georgia or something like that. She just got clemency from the governor because she was a child sex slave.
Yeah.
And she shot one of the people
that was going to kill her.
Yeah. And then she took his money, and so from the back in whatever that southern district's view was, well, she clearly orchestrated it, and it's her fault, and she should get first-degree murder because she took his money, and that wasn't just self-defense, even though she took the money to get away.
I got another example.
I got another example. But she shouldn't vote. No.
Well, I got another example too. Look, let's look at the forest fires that happen on the West Coast. They are going to be happening more and more often. And you want to know who's on the front lines? Firefighters. And you want to know who's helping those firefighters? A lot of prisoners. And these prisoners are getting the experience of knowing how to combat these fires and protect people's homes and their livelihoods. But as soon as that said prisoner gets out of jail, guess what? They cannot apply to be a fireman. They cannot provide to be a first responder, even though they have years of experience on the front line, putting their livelihoods at risk, being paid what again, Daniel? 11 cents an hour?
Yeah, enough.
I mean, I'm not familiar with the California state laws in regards to what
actually California is much better. I think it's $2 an hour.
Yeah,
$2 an hour.
Enough to afford toothpaste at the commissary once every 6 months.
Wow,
pretty good.
That's madness, and that's the reality of what we have here in the United States. So when Senator Bernie Sanders says he wants to help prisoners the right to vote, I'm in support of it, because if we start drawing the line, like Daniel says, if we start drawing the line onto who can vote and who cannot vote, well then guess what, everyone? I don't care what your political ideology is, Democrat, Independent, Republican, your votes can be denied as well. And we got to stop that from happening.
A couple of things I wanted to add before we move on. So in April, Bernie was speaking at a town hall in Muscatine, Iowa, and he says, "I think it is absolutely the direction we should go." He's speaking of giving the right to vote to felons. In my state, what we do is separate. You're paying a price. You committed a crime. You're in jail. That's bad. But you're still living in American society, and you still have a right to vote. We focused a lot on the right to vote while we were talking about this, but I do want to point out that this criminal justice reform plan is broad, and it does a lot of really great things, and it very correctly points out that our current criminal justice system is predominantly punitive against people who are committing minor crimes against society, drug possession, for example.
Okay.
We should not be running a punitive system of justice. We should be running a rehabilitative system of justice.
All right. So there's a couple of things I want to read out here. Bluebell 51. I was attacked by my ex-boyfriend with a hammer, and when I fought back, the police threatened to arrest me when I was in radiology getting x-rays. I'm very sorry that happened to you. And then Wesley Wiles, I think this is what you said, Dan, in regards to being paid $2. $1.75 an hour. It could be around $2 right now. I'll look it up real quick. Nonetheless, I mean, come on, don't be doing that, all right? And then A.R. Francis, I already feel if my vote is not counted. Well, that's what happens when we have a corrupt neoliberal system. You're absolutely correct. So, everyone, I mean, we got to remember, we got to fight for a better future, and we have to respect each other, and more importantly, just making sure that people do have that right and privilege to vote. And this war on drugs is denying people that basic right. So, now moving on to another story, and it kind of relates to a little bit to what Paul was talking about to some degree. Daniel, what's going on?
Okay, so Kamala Harris, who has...
You mean Kamala the cop?
Who, as we know, has always been transparent and forthright and consistent with everything she's ever talked about, has decided to flip-flop yet again at a wealthy fundraiser in the Hamptons this weekend, because, you know, that's where you go to meet the people. Kamala Harris told wealthy donors that she, quote, has not been comfortable with Medicare for All proposal pushed by Bernie Sanders, which of course she co-signed, one of her leading rivals in the primary. Quote, I think almost every member of the United States Senate who's running for president and many others have signed on to a variety of plans in the Senate, and I have done the same, Harris said. According to remarks provided by her campaign, quote, all of them are good ideas, which is why I support them. And I support Medicare for All. But as you may have noticed, over the course of the many months, I have not been comfortable with Bernie's plan, the Medicare for All plan. So I want to read one thing again. I'm just going to kind of snip the lines together. And I support Medicare for All, a sentence later. I don't support I'm not comfortable with Medicare for All. Interesting. 2 years ago, Harris was comfortable enough with Sanders' bill to become the first senator to co-sponsor it. Sounds like she liked it then. And back then, she exhibited no discomfort. No one was holding her hostage. That would be the people she arrested when she was California Attorney General. That sounded weird.
But she did a good job, Daniel.
She did a good job. A fantastic job arresting those parents and for their kids being truant and laughing about we're getting off track. Anyway, Senator Harris was hearing a lot from lots of voters, real concern specifically about proactively abolishing private insurance, the 4-year transition, middle-class tax hikes. So she came up with her own plan to adjust for those. Frankly, it is better than his. So she wants to, you know, in all of her wisdom, take a 4-year transition, which is 1 term as a president, and make it 10 years so that a second president would have to put in, even if she got voted in twice, which I'm sure the insurance companies love, because then you just get a Republican in next and they say no, and then Kamala said, I tried. I almost was like Obama. In fact, I was better. So what's it do? So it's over the course of a decade. It allows private insurers to offer plans through Medicare if they comply with strict, never changing, because as we know, laws never change for any reason, government rules. She also plans to do revenue raising without increasing middle-class taxes. Sanders' campaign has slammed Harris's plan as a contrived half measure and one that would leave full implementation to her presidential successor. And on Monday, Sanders signaled that Harris's Medicare for All slight in the Hamptons may figure into their broader case against the top rival. And we're very, like I said before, I was worried about the shouting match between Kamala and Bernie Sanders, because I thought she was going to be the one, they were going to be the final two. It looks closer, it'll be like Elizabeth Warren and Sanders now. But Tulsi Gabbard luckily took care of that. So this is her losing all of her donor money and now flipping over to trying to get more money from money people. So they made a point that, you know, she's basically talking to donors in 2 different ways. Guys, what do you think?
Well, first, I'm not surprised by Kamala Harris backpedaling and being afraid of Medicare for All. Remember, we did a small town hall. We did a coverage on a town hall that Kamala Harris was a part of, and she said that she was for Medicare for All. And then the next day, and we all heard it, the next day, guess what? She backpedaled away. And why? Because she got a phone call from her donors. A phone call from her donors told her, please, no, do not support Medicare for All, or we're cutting your funding. So, you know, Kamala Harris is a neoliberal centrist corporate Democrat. She's going to continue the policies of, you know, centrist Democrats. She's not going to fight for Medicare for All, even though, you know, Americans are just struggling to make ends meet. And a lot of Americans don't have $1,000 in their savings account in case something bad happens where they have to go to the hospital. So every other country in the free world has affordable health care. Just the United States doesn't. But we have money for the Joint Strike Fighter. Paul.
Medical system, Medicare for All, people, centrists, establishment thinking, democratically aligned, pundits will say that it is not good to have litmus tests. But Medicare for All has served as a litmus test for a lot of people for quite a long time. It's surprising that it seems that almost every candidate knows that. Every candidate is going to come out and say they support Medicare for All, and then a day later flip-flop and go back around or talk about how they support it, but what they mean by that is they support private insurance companies doing stuff for Americans, which isn't Medicare for All. Like, I support Medicare for All, except none of the things that make it Medicare for All what it is what they're saying. So I think it's very right of the Sanders campaign to slam Kamala Harris for this being a half measure, mostly because it is a half measure. It's worse than a half measure.
I think it's being generous, honestly.
That is fair. It's generous to call it that, because it's essentially like, I'm totally for Medicare for All if by Medicare for All you mean complete private control of the insurance markets, which is no change from what we have now.
It actually would take away that control from Medicare itself, so it's actually even further away.
It's ridiculous. And what's funny to me is the number of politicians like Kamala who will go out there and say, I support Medicare for All, but don't look too closely at what my Medicare for All policy is, because it isn't Medicare for All.
And then, do you think Kamala Harris is going to be talking about that during the general election? Should she get the nomination? I mean, I really doubt it.
Well, she's probably going to be more like, Trump's bad. I
think that's her main policy.
That's what everyone is saying, from Joe Biden to Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, saying Trump's bad. Yeah, we get it. We get that Trump's bad.
Orange man is bad.
But there's a reason why we got Trump.
Yeah.
It's because we have a corrupt neoliberal system. Trump is not the creator of it. He inherited it, but there's a reason why he's there, and that's because Washington, D.C. and the Republican and Democratic establishment, they feel that running centrist, neoliberal, neoconservative candidates are what Americans want. But no. Guess who owns those said candidates and those elected leaders in Washington, D.C.? Wall Street, the big banks and major corporations. They're the ones who have to say. We don't. There's a serious issue with healthcare in this country, student debt, a crumbling infrastructure, climate change, and so much more. So just imagine if Bernie Sanders gets the nomination. He's going to be talking about those issues in the general election and can actually beat Trump. Someone like Kamala Harris or Cory Booker or Joe Biden or Pete Buttigieg, they don't have what it takes. And we all saw what happened. We all saw what happened the last time the Democrats ran a corporate candidate. Clinton lost, and that's it. None of this BS about Russiagate. You ran a failed candidate. The DNC thought that they can get away with it. We cannot afford it. So this is why we got to get involved in this 2020 election cycle. And look, guys, it's just not us you can listen to. You have your phones and your computer just right in front of you. Just look at all these candidates' voting record and where they stand on policies. Bernie Sanders is consistent. He's been talking about Medicare for All. He's been talking about climate change. He's been talking about student debt. He's been talking about a lot of issues, and he's been consistent about it since day one. Somebody like Kamala Harris? No. Daniel, any final words?
It's interesting. It's like Hillary Clinton ran last time, and I feel like to a large degree we're dealing with different aspects of Clinton in this election. Kamala represents the two-faced nature of Hillary Clinton, maybe better than anyone else. She is the exemplar of the concept of a public and a private position. She's the exemplar of saying, I care about kids, and also saying, I'm putting kids in jail. She's the exemplar of saying, weed should be legal, and the exemplar of saying, weed should not be legal, and I'm happy to arrest these kids for weed. She's the exemplar of saying, we need criminal justice reform, and the exemplar of saying, police should never have to wear body cameras. She's a walking contradiction, and this is exactly how she's being treated in this election. Is exactly how Hillary Clinton should have been treated in the previous election if she didn't have the connection. She didn't have all the stuff that Hillary Clinton did. This is what her campaign would have looked like. You have Joe Biden, who represents that inevitability that Hillary Clinton claimed to have in the last election, but he has really nothing else. Like I said before, the DNC can never, ever hurt an election more than they did in 2016. That was the peak of their power. They were under one roof. Everyone, again, Hillary Clinton controlled everything, media, money, DNC, everything. And she lost, and she won by 10 points in a primary to someone no one had ever heard of. Kamala can't do that. She's already falling apart. Tulsi Gabbard took her out in one debate. What's Biden going to do the second that people don't see him as the exemplar of winning and everyone else that's in there?
Oh, don't worry. We got a Biden story coming up, too.
Oh, yeah. It's just, Kamala, just drop out or join someone else's campaign. You're done.
Just endorse Biden already. We know you want to.
Yeah.
Be his VP. We know that's what you're angling at.
Well, so here's the funny thing. I just keep thinking about all of the candidates that are on those stages at the Democratic debate. Of all of them, there are relatively few who are outright saying they're against Medicare for all. It's Delaney, Bennett,
Biden.
Right? And it's showing itself to be such poor strategy to try to convince people that a demonstrably effective policy that works everywhere else in the world where it's implemented somehow can't work here.
Now,
But
you get out of here. You're making, what's wrong
Paul,
with
but
you?
Americans are really stupid. Isn't that the natural implication whenever that gets
Right. So,
brought
but
up?
here's what's interesting is of the other candidates who feign support for Medicare for all, I can only think of two that seem to actually support Medicare for all, and that would be Bernie and Tulsi.
That's it.
I mean, people will say, "Oh, Warren supports it," and I challenge you to find on her website anywhere where she details her plan on Medicare for all, because it isn't there.
But
She has a
Paul,
plan.
she's
She
a
has-
policy wonk.
Yeah,
Doesn't that mean everything?
Hey, Paul, she's got a plan for it, buddy.
Yeah,
All right,
her
you hear
plan
me?
is to do nothing, apparently.
Hey, you get out of here. No. So now to a frightening issue, everyone. It's time to panic. Look, we talk about climate change a lot in this show, and look, it's a real serious issue that the entire human species is going to have to deal with. Yes, there's going to be super hurricanes, there's going to be forest fires, there's going to be droughts and polar vortexes, and the thing is, humanity plays a major role in affecting our environment. It's just a fact. And now the Amazon is on fire, and at least according to the French and German leaders, German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President Emmanuel Macron are both saying this is an acute emergency in regards to the Amazon rainforest being caught on fire. Now, this is a major issue that a lot of conservationists and environmental groups, as well as indigenous people, have been taking videos and sharing this on social media about the real impact. It's also important to note that there has been some story going around where indigenous people actually won a major case against an oil lobby group in Brazil, and just a few days later now, coincidence, not saying anything, but the Amazon is now on fire. Plus, it doesn't help knowing the fact that Brazil's president, Mr. Bolsonaro, is basically against climate change. He's sort of like Brazil's version of Trump. So already you got a perfect recipe for disaster. And you know, this area, the Amazon rainforest, is home to 3 million species of plants and animals, 1 million indigenous people. It's about half the size of Europe, and this is an international crisis. And if this fire continues on, we could be losing one of our major lungs, or the major lung, for the planet. And we only have one planet. We're not getting off this planet anytime soon. This is our home. We're stuck here together, all of us. All 6 billion humans are stuck on this planet. And if we destroy our ecosystems, it's going to systematically affect every single country, every single person on this planet. And we as a human species will be dealing with the consequences and repercussions for decades upon decades. And this is a very high cost. And already, you know, the Brazilian, I apologize for that, the Brazilian president is basically turning a blind eye. He has basically dismissed this and saying that you know, who knows who started the fires. He actually said, asked on Thursday who is responsible for the fires. He says, the Indians. Do you want me to blame the Indians? Do you want me to blame the Martians? Everyone is suspect. But the biggest suspects are NGOs. So, you know, and then he went on to say, when asked for proof against this, did I accuse the NGOs directly? I just suspect them. Already sounding like Trump. But this is a major concern because, mind you, the Brazilian president is in support of major industry and agricultural groups basically demolishing and removing some of the forested lands. And it's interesting to point out, though, that many of his supporters, especially in agriculture, are actually asking the Brazilian president to maybe step up and actually call for limiting these fires and stopping them before it gets out of hand. This is an international concern. And look, I respect every single country's right and sovereignty to do what they want on their borders, but the Amazon rainforest is a human treasure, is an international treasure, and the very fact that it's being demolished, being burnt down, is a warning sign for all of us. So, Daniel, Paul, I want to open the floor up to you guys.
So I'm going to bring in a few more stats on this. So the burn area that we're talking about is about the size of Texas. Yeah. There are 2 football fields worth of trees being burned every minute. Media has ignored this. I'm very apologetic that we didn't bring this up sooner. I wasn't aware of it. Satellite images, I mean, the amount of CO2 that's being pumped into the atmosphere. The Amazon, I want to bring this up too. The Amazon rainforest has existed for 55 million years, and it might die in our lifetime. Because the other factor of this is that if, I think it's another 20% of the rainforest is burned away, there's going to be this terrible feedback loop where the rainforest, hence as a rainforest with all the trees and the water that they've collected, it's almost, it's like having a giant lake kind of within a forest, even though it's spread throughout. There's a point, I think it's again 20% more getting burned, that it stops. And then you have a cascading effect of it can't supply or take in the amount of water and maintain it that it does, which means it will dry out, which means it will burn, which means it will dry out, which means it'll burn. And no more rainforest. It basically becomes like a savanna similar to Africa. And it's not, I mean, it's 20% of the world's oxygen comes from there. And it's a giant sink for CO2. And Brazilian president has said, burn it down.
Oh, he doesn't care.
He doesn't care because from his point of view, he looks at it like, hey, we can make more beef. We can put more industry here, and this jungle's taking up this room. I also want to remind people, I think it's something like maybe 40% or 50% of all the species that are known in the world are in that rainforest. And we're quite confident that many of them have died. So what are we going to do? At this point, the fires are too big to stop, from what I understand. They're burning too quickly, and we're triggering a feedback loop that the planet hasn't seen in 55 million years. So there you have it.
Paul.
It baffles me how right-wing thinking is sort of blind to or outright denies climate catastrophe, ecological concerns, all at the behest of a libertarian ethos, all for me and nothing for anyone else, right? Nothing matters, when it comes to the ecology. Nothing matters when it comes to the atmosphere, when it comes to rainforest, when it comes to species and life. But you know what does matter? If I can have land to raise cattle on, if I can get more oil, if I can get more financial success for me, great. It's good. Destruction of the planet? You don't know if the planet's really going to be destroyed. You can't tell the future.
I'll go ahead.
Yeah.
That's dumb. It's dumb. It's reckless, and it pisses me off.
To build on the point Paul just made, they are burning down the rainforest so that Brazil can maintain their GDP.
Yeah,
that's what it comes down to, and it's like, a younger me would have many more choice words about how to treat someone like this, but. This is like to me, this is like the equivalent of like nuking a place. This is the equivalent of going to war with Iran for me. And, people should be hung by their toes for this.
Okay. So it's unrelated, but somewhat connected. I mention this time and time again, but myself and Daniel went to Indiana in the summer of 2018. And we did a short documentaries on the industrial facilities that are on Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan is the 5th largest body of water. It's here in the Western Hemisphere. It borders Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, and Indiana. And these industrial facilities are there dumping in regulated toxic waste. And what do I mean by this? Well, you're going to hear it again. This is industrial waste that is basically mixed in with water and then dumped right into Lake Michigan. Now, these chemicals cannot be made safe once you dump it into a major body of water. They're still a danger, and it is a threat. And I just remember reading some of the comments on our Facebook version of when we posted this, but also it's up on our YouTube channel as well. And there are people who I'm not going to be reading that. That's a little bit too...
Thank you for the...
Thank you for the donation on that one, but no.
After we were just talking before the show about Hassan Piker, so we want to cross our T's.
No. Yep. Never that.
But no. I appreciate the enthusiasm.
I understand the sentiment.
Yeah, understand. Thank you, but no.
Paul's words are better than mine. Replace my words with his.
There's some things I'm just not gonna. No, absolutely not. But getting back on point, but there were people who were posting on our documentary video saying like, well, it doesn't matter, or they're not true in the facts, or I'm making my money. I don't really care about what happens to Lake Michigan. These industrial facilities are safe. And the thing is, no. Whatever you do to the environment, it's going to have a consequence and reaction. Just a few weeks ago, one of those same industrial facilities had a toxic leak, and cyanide was dumped into a river body going into Lake Michigan. Some parts of the dunes were shut down, and there were fish dying there. Don't tell me that the water is safe to drink. Don't tell me that it's safe to go into the lake. I used to love going to Lake Michigan as a kid in Indiana. Now, I'm literally afraid to go in there for a swim. I'm afraid to even go anywhere near that place because, yes, there are dangerous toxic materials in that lake, and it's a large body of fresh water. And guess what, Chicago? It's coming into our water system as well. We're drinking that same stuff. And so you just can't turn a blind eye to what's happening to the Amazon because that is a major ecosystem. And if it's gone, guess what? It is gone forever. We got to fight for the planet. We have to have a real plan to make sure the human species doesn't die out because if this continues on, who knows what we're going to look like in 30 years. Yeah. It could all fall apart. And look, I don't want people to get hurt. I don't want anyone to be suffering because of climate change. But as a reality, and we're going to have to deal with it and live with it. It will become the unfortunate new normal.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to rant on, but that's the truth of it, man.
It's like, I'm kind of pondering in my head like Eric's comment. And it's like, well, if I was president, I would have some options available because, he's treating it like, oh, the rainforest is mine, it's Brazil's, it's in our natural boundaries. But the rainforest belongs to the planet. And it's been there for 55 million years. And just because you have an arbitrary border doesn't mean you get to destroy world history. I mean, that rainforest is only 20 years younger, or 10 million years younger than the reign of the dinosaurs. That's history that humans have 10,000 years. I mean, come on.
We got about 6 million years of evolution and 10 to 12,000 years of civilization.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And look what we're doing. Hey, but as I know a lot of people, conservative people I've talked to have said, humans don't have the kind of power to change the Earth's climate.
Well, we do.
I heard the Koch brother tell me that.
Yeah. Doesn't quite have the same ring, does it?
No.
Yeah.
The Koch.
Yeah, but
I like that. The Koch. I think
Mr. Koch.
Mr. Koch.
Yeah, we just have to preserve this planet. Otherwise, look, if nothing's done, who knows what the world will look like.
Yeah, let me read really quickly. Yeah. Since we didn't read his super chat, I'm going to read Eric RPG's recent comment. Hey, the U.S. meddles and other sovereign nations for oil in caps. I was just saying it in jest. He's a threat to all life on Earth. On that, I can agree with.
On that, we can. Well done, Eric RPG. Yeah, that is the truth. But the thing is, we got to. We just got to preserve the planet. Otherwise, we're gonna. Who knows what we'll look like as a species? And yes, guess what? If the dinosaurs can die out, the Earth can also shake us off like a bad case of fleas too. We're not that special. So Daniel, I know I want to let you introduce the story, but I gotta say, everyone, it is now time to Biden it up.
There's your special effect.
Special effects.
Yeah. All right, it's time to Biden it up. Thank you.
All right.
We just got to get a rainbow for Kit to be able to use, but the rainbows are all the wrong colors.
It didn't work. All right, well, what did Biden do this time?
Shades of gray.
Yeah.
What did Biden do this time?
Okay, so Biden made an oopsie, as PewDiePie would say. Former President Joseph R. Biden Jr. on Friday took a series of unusual rhetorical detours at the end of a town hall-style campaign. Remember, he's only going to like 1 or 2 events a week, and even that he's saying is too taxing on him. Yet everyone else is doing more. Anyway, even Delaney did more, even if only 10 people showed up to it. I'm sorry, 11. I was 10. Hey. No, that's a big mistake on my part.
Get your facts right, pal.
I was 10% off with that one person. Anyway, So he's now took a series of unusual rhetorical detours at the end of a town hall style campaign event, normally dedicated to healthcare, speculating on how a political assassination of Barack Obama hit the president he was VP under, who, of course, he would have been president, might have affected the country in 2008, and recalling that he was accused of being gay because of his support of women's rights in the 70s.
Oh, boy.
Kit, you sent me a wonderful picture of Biden with a shoe in his mouth, and that's all I'm hearing reading this. My senior semester, they were both shot and killed. Biden said, this is talking about Martin Luther King and Robert F. Kennedy.
Yes.
Imagine what would happen if, God forbid, Barack Obama had been assassinated and I became president and became the de facto nominee. What would have happened in America? I think of where we are at the moment. You know, none of you men are old. Women are old enough. It's hard to read this because it doesn't make sense. But
even Trump is more coherent.
But hey, this guy, as we know, the mainstream media easily defeats Trump, no questions. Everyone is right. I'm just gonna skip over this because it's actually hard for my brain to even try and.
It's incoherent.
I'm having a hard time speaking right now. I think that means it's working. In 2008, running for the Democratic presidential nomination, Hillary Clinton drew criticism when she referred to the political assassinations of 1968 as she defended staying in the long primary against Obama. Remember, that's where Bernie Bro originally came from, which we'll get to in a little bit. It was Obama boys, and I remember that when she insinuated that Obama would be assassinated and that's why you should vote for her, because she wouldn't be assassinated because she's not as big of a deal. Mr. Biden, the front-runner in the race for the Democratic presidential nomination, compared his political awakening in his 20s to the present moment, asking how many members of the audience on the campus of Dartmouth College were high school or college students.
About 40.
Wait, if I'm on a college campus talking to college students, I probably wouldn't ask whether they're high school or college students. That's just me.
Mind you, 40 hands went up in a room full of hundreds. Apparently, that's what it says here.
Oh,
look, check this out. About 40 hands went up in the audience of several hundred.
Yeah, Biden is like,
he's an idiot.
He's doing all kinds of good work. Unless I'm mistaken, Donald Trump did for your generation what the loss of two of my heroes did for mine. He told the students, adding, what they did was make you realize, my God, we're in trouble. Well, I'm glad Biden, after Trump getting elected, realized what we at Hardlens have been talking about for years, what mainstream media has been ignoring for years. What I'll say is Biden is finally tangentially close, sort of in proximity to, in a top floor of a hotel, of the issue at hand. And he's still a number of years too late.
Okay, hold on, Daniel. I just gotta say this because this stood out to me. At the end of it, of course, we all know Trump was saying that he is a savior or something, and Biden then I guess trying to be sarcastic, trying to make a joke, is saying the same thing. I am the savior, Mr. Biden in tone, paraphrasing the president. I mean, come on, man. Biden said, anyway, good night, folks. Look, this goes back.
And then he tripped over the shoelaces he tied together and accidentally groped a puppy.
But everyone, this is according to corporate media and the DNC establishment. That's it. It's all over. Everyone fall in line. Time to vote for Biden. He's the front runner. This is the guy to do it. You know, I was questioning, why isn't Obama endorsing him? And now every time Biden speaks, I bet Obama's just shaking his head. Nope, not today. Not endorsing him today. Nope. No. I
heard Obama asked Biden not to run. I don't know where that came from or what the sourcing of it was, but it's been making the rounds.
Here's the thing. There's
even Obama's like, I've been this guy's president for a while.
I've worked with him. So all those funny memes where Obama looks like stressed out and it looks like Biden is saying something funny, probably Biden said something really stupid and Obama.
And that's why he's stressed out.
Yeah, and it's like, man, no. I selected this man as my VP.
Obama didn't age 10 years because of the job. He aged 10 years because he's trying to keep Biden in control.
Yeah, trying to keep Biden from Biden it up.
Keeping him on a short lease.
No, and another thing too. Again, just
that's why they had the dog pictures so much. It was a subliminal message.
Probably so. But there's another thing, too, to mention. That is, you know, whenever you hear corporate media saying that Biden's the front runner, just listen to Biden speak, and you realize that if he gets the nomination, Trump will destroy him. It's just that simple. I did a short live stream too about how his campaign is basically like censoring him, making sure he doesn't do a lot of events, because the more Biden speaks, the more people realize how much full of shit he is. This is his third time trying to run for the office of president. 1988, 2008, and now 2020. What's the difference? Nothing has changed. And then his wife, Jill Biden, says everyone needs to fall in line. I just can't help but think of 2016. What happened the last time people told us to fall in line?
Can we save the prize for unity until after the nomination process is done?
No, I really want, like, when Bernie Sanders wins the nomination, in my opinion, I think that's going to happen.
It has to be Bernie Sanders.
Fingers crossed.
I'm going to make sure to tell all those people who I know hate Bernie Sanders to fall in line and follow your own words.
We need to have unity.
Yeah, we have to have unity. But I think it's really funny. Like, this is like, again, Hillary Clinton was the peak of the DNC's internal power. Biden, we had a bet a while back on how Biden was going to last, and I still think that bet is in the running. Kit, you thought he wasn't going to join the campaign.
I didn't think so. Hey, look, guys, I thought that Biden was going to do it. I thought he was too much of an idiot. But see, the thing is, he's proven me right. Biden, you were an idiot. You shouldn't have ran at all.
Actually, it's funny. It turns out Kit had the same opinion Obama did on Biden. We're now in the running because I said he'll drop out after New Hampshire.
Yeah,
I said he'll drop out after Super Tuesday.
Yeah, and those are still, and the winner gets pizza from the other two. So one of us is probably getting pizza. But unless he does like Iowa or something after that. But Biden, I mean, what a train wreck. But it goes to show how little power the media has this time around. Hillary Clinton could do this last time and it worked because she had the more Kamala Harris edge of it.
Yeah.
But Biden is just such a George Bush character that just is on the other side of the aisle.
He can't do it. He just can't do it. He doesn't have what it takes. And look, I'm just going to say it again. Biden does not have what it takes to win in the general election.
And also, when he drops out, because he will at some point, Bernie Sanders gets the lion's share of his voters.
Right. And also, guys, Bernie Sanders can build a coalition of Democrat, Republican, Independent, Conservative, Socialist, however kind of people that he could build a coalition of voters in a general election. He can convince people to support his cause and basically say, "Hey, here's a reason why you should vote for me." Biden, his campaign is only telling people, "Hey, just fall in line and vote. We're not Trump. Trump is bad. Trump. Okay, great. That's fine. You can keep on saying that message, but that didn't work in 2016. It's not going to work now." And the very fact that Biden still has this audacity to think that he has what it takes, that he has the ability to be a leader or bring in some kind of change. No, it's just the system is going to go right back to normal and everyone's going to be at brunch. But you know what the problem is that let's say Biden wins. Well, that's not going to stop another Trump from coming into power because there's reasons why there was a reason why we got Trump in the first place. And yes, if Biden gets the nomination, Trump will win. It's just that simple. And I hate saying it, but it's a reality. Trump will destroy Biden.
I think it's weird that people often point at Trump and say, "Oh, he speaks at like a 4th grade level," which is more or less true, but he's effective.
Yeah.
Like he has this sort of bullying tactic, keep it simple, hammer the same point over and over again. Joe has a different problem. Joe tries to be eloquent, but has the vocabulary of Dan Quayle, basically.
Paul, the man said this.
I believe that man and fish can coexist peacefully together.
Exactly. Was this the same speech where he did the she was an old friend, long friend, old time, long friend? Like, what are you talking about, Joe? Put your words together in a real sentence. Do you want a candidate like Bernie who can go out there regularly, almost every day, talk about policy proposals and gaffe-free explain his positions on policies? Or do you want a candidate who goes out, once a week and immediately has all of his staffers come out there and backpedal everything he just said because it was just full of gaffes?
But Paul, Bernie Sanders is too old. Biden's the young spring chicken that we all need.
But dude looks like he's about to have a stroke at any moment.
There's another thing, too, to point out, and that is, speaking of Biden's campaign staff, I'm really impressed with Simone Sanders' mental gymnastics when she has to defend Biden and his gas. I mean, honestly, it's interesting to see her fall from grace because she was originally a part of the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016 and now part of Biden. It's like, lady, you really gave up a lot of integrity to work for a guy that's shooting himself in his foot. And mind you, Paul, just to add on another thing too, this is the same Joe Biden who said poor kids are just as smart as white kids.
Yeah, dude can't string together a coherent sentence.
You know what? Even Trump wouldn't say anything that stupid, and that's saying a lot. So,
Biden, please drop out.
Let me actually, I just tweeted Simone Sanders yesterday. I don't tweet often. I have a Twitter. It's right here. You can go to it, and every now and then I'll tweet.
Yeah.
So I was writing on how right, because Simone Sanders was the one that at the DNC was having a meeting to talk about having a climate debate, and she voiced her opposition to having a climate debate in the Democratic Party. And I just wrote, primary voters care about climate change. Now Simone Sanders, on behalf of Biden, tells DNC to table the concept of a climate debate, just like when she was in favor of giving people health care until Biden paid her some money. Simone Sanders has fallen as far as the ash from the Amazon is rising.
Ooh,
wow.
Wingo.
Zinger.
Well, hey, that is what it is, and Biden just doesn't have what it takes. Sorry, folks. This is why we got to get involved during this 2020 election cycle, and we got to call out the election fraud.
They're weaker than they've ever been.
Yeah.
We have for Biden to go out there and tearfully eulogize David Koch.
Oh, yes!
Oh, my God.
He gave me so much. I mean, he was a good friend.
He was such a wonderful patriot.
Yeah.
Millionaires and billionaires are just as
The
patriotic as
Lolita
anyone
Express,
else.
that guy's gone. But the Koch guy, I used to do them together.
Oh,
now I can't.
Oh, well. No,
It's terrible.
that sounds like Clinton. Now, as for Obama, it's like...
I'm sure Biden was in the corner.
Yeah, probably. Maybe. And there's Obama thinking, I can't believe I chose him as my VP. And let me be clear, it was not my choice. All right, now moving on. Hey, if you think that's funny...
I think you're right. I think, yeah.
Biden
was like, hey, white people, don't worry. We got this guy.
Right here. Ha, ha, ha. Yeah, boy. So now moving on to some positive news and a story that I covered earlier this week, and that is Bernie Sanders' climate change is more radical than his opponents and more likely to succeed. This is a great article from The Intercept. So if you tried to design a program with the aim of offending the top brass of the world's most powerful corporations and the politicians whose careers they bankroll, you'd get something like what Bernie Sanders unveiled today in his $16.3 trillion Green New Deal platform. We need a president who has the courage, the vision, and the record to face down the greed of fossil fuel executives and the billionaire class who stand in the way of climate action. Echoing also Franklin Delano Roosevelt's message, we need a president who welcomes their hatred. That is from Senator Bernie Sanders. Basically, this Green New Deal is more of a beefed up version of what Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Ed Markey introduced in April. Now, it would generate a lot of big changes in regards to ending the fossil fuel imports, the exports, and hold on, what else?
We got Jerome in the chat.
Jerome, shout out to you, Jerome.
Jerome!
Our editor on the board who's now on the West Coast. Hashtag bring Jerome home. But that's a much more bigger plan.
That's literally the plan we can't tell you guys about yet. Is hashtag bring Jerome home.
Hope you're having fun, Jerome. We miss you, buddy. But thank you. I got other impressions too, folks. I'm here all night. So it's talking about dealing with decarbonization, home and abroad. It's talking about rebuilding our infrastructure, introducing green technologies, protecting our ecosystems, and it's as enough. So there's a couple other things in here too. It's basically talking about getting rid of the cash for clunkers, a financial assistance program to scale up electrical vehicle usage, plans to boost public transportation ridership by 65% by 2030, a requirement that Congressional Budget Office work with the Environmental Protection Agency to give new legislation on climate score, and also ensure that the indigenous rights of people, especially indigenous people, are protected, and also dealing with failing nuclear industry that we have here. I mean, there are a lot of power plants that are severely out of date and need to be reformed.
We had a good segment a while back on the state of nuclear power. We can't get into it right now. There's not enough time.
Complicated.
Yeah, but also dealing with carbon taxes and making sure that basically making sure that the fossil fuel industry no longer has its power or influence over Washington, D.C. Because look, let's face it, we live in an oligarchy where money is speech and corporations are people, and the fossil fuel lobby can buy off not only GOP politicians, but also DNC establishment politicians, which is why you hear some centrist Democrats even refusing to acknowledge the threat and real danger that is climate change. Even earlier in today's show, we talked about the Amazon rainforest on fire. It's a reality. So here's a quote from Senator Bernie Sanders. Fossil fuel billionaires whose greed lies at the very heart of the climate crisis has spent hundreds of millions of dollars protecting their profits at the expense of our future. And we will do whatever it takes to squeeze every last penny out of the earth, and we'll do whatever it takes to squeeze every last penny out of the earth. Basically, he's saying that the fossil fuel industry pay for their pollution through litigation fees and taxes and eliminating the federal fossil fuel subsidies. And that's from what Senator Bernie Sanders. But he also says this, most importantly, we must build an unprecedented...
We'll get there.
He got affected by the Biden article. I'm really sorry, guys.
That's
my fault.
Unprecedented grassroots movement that is powerful enough to take them on and win. Young people, advocates, tribes, cities, and states all over this country have already begun this important work, and we will continue to follow their lead. It is an approach that distinguishes Sanders not just from the primary field, but from the last 30-plus years of mainstream climate policy making in the United States. So already miles upon miles ahead of his other opponents. Senator Bernie Sanders' $16.3 trillion Green New Deal plan is exactly what we need. It's talking about dealing with the threat of climate change and, more importantly, changing the conversation. Because Washington, D.C. is in its own bubble, and the fossil fuel industry is right in there with all our politicians making policy decisions that will impact our future. So, guys, I want to open this floor and actually kind of bring in your comments and thoughts about Bernie Sanders' $16.3 trillion Green New Deal plan.
It's vital, absolutely necessary. The IPCC, international environmental groups have been telling us for years that our time is limited to cut carbon emissions basically to zero, to begin carbon recapture processes, to reverse course. One of the things that I find that will act as a counterbalance to this, or will be antithetical to a plan like this, is America's general stance toward petroleum, right? Everything about our economy is propped up by petroleum. Our entire military infrastructure is there to prop up petroleum as a world commodity. We give undue amounts of subsidies to oil and petrochemical companies. Everything in the apparatus is set up and designed to support the use of fossil fuels as a commodity that backs our currency. Everything. And so while this plan is absolutely vital, and that is absolutely what we should be doing, there are institutional levers at every single stage, at every corner, that are going to try and combat this. It's really frustrating because this is the kind of thing that we need to survive as a species on this planet for more than another generation. But the interests that seem to be ready to rush headlong into extinction want to make that money and want to keep oil the world commodity.
Yeah, I think, you know, what's the price on the continuation of the human species? It's been put off for decades. We've known about this since the 70s. And we chose not to fix this ahead of time. So the transition is going to be rough, but it's self-induced. I mean, what do you expect? Do you think that we can just burn down the Amazon rainforest, dig up all the fossil fuel sinks that are underground, put them into the atmosphere, and we could just, like that, flip it back? No, we're going to have to pay for the last few generations. And it's difficult to in a degree. Fossil fuels allowed us to get to the point right now where we can talk to you guys through a camera to anywhere in the world that we wanted at basically no cost. But we did it with a source of, 300 million year old fossilized fossil fuels. When we have sun that's right now beaming at us, you could, what was it? 100 square mile desert gets enough sunlight that you can capture with solar panels to power the entire U.S. But it's not the infrastructure we're doing. And Paul did a wonderful story that always resonates with me a while back on just the degree and the cost of fossil fuel subsidies, taking away them, what was it, $700 billion a year or something like that?
Sort of the unaccounted for subsidies that don't show up on budget line items.
Yeah, and it was like all of it was like 1.5 trillion, if I'm not mistaken.
If you
per
include
year.
what is on the budget line items that are subsidies to oil and gas industries, and if you include my assessment that the U.S. military is essentially there to prop up the oil and gas industry, also, all of that combined ends up being 1.4 trillion annually.
And this bill that you're talking about is 16 trillion over 10 years, right? Mm-hmm. So literally, the fossil fuel subsidies pay for this transition, just that.
Yeah.
Yep, just flip them over.
And the thing is, look, one final note before we do move on is that the fossil fuel industry knew about the dangers of climate change. They knew about it for a very long time, and we are all going to be impacted by the threat of climate change. It's a reality, and you know, if nothing's done about it, then yes, there will be a refugee crisis. There will be a mass migration, the likes of which we've never seen before in human history. And there's a very good chance that our international economy and our said societies cannot withstand this amount of pressure. There will be many factors in which the house of cards will fall apart. And Senator Bernie Sanders' plan is on point. This is why he's my number one choice. I'm going to make it very clear. I support Senator Bernie Sanders. I believe that he is a candidate that has what it takes to really win the primary and the general election. He's the one who inspired people to get involved after 2016. He's the one who inspired many people to get involved in the 2018 midterm election cycle and going on to the other midterm election cycle and even in this 2020 election cycle, because there's other congressional candidates that we're talking to. And just a few that we have spoken to, universally across the board, Senator Bernie Sanders inspired them, got them involved to step up. We're hearing the same thing. And this proves to me that he is the leader and somebody who can win the nomination. It's just now time for us to get involved in this presidential election cycle. Paul?
I want to make one quick point. Sometimes people will try to combat the notion of transitioning to renewable energies by saying that there's a lack of adequate rare earth minerals to do all of the infrastructure necessary to completely convert all of our energy systems over to renewable energies. That I don't think is a valid enough point to go with. First of all, we don't really have an accurate assessment of how much rare earth minerals, things like neodymium magnets, there are out there to be mined. Also, it doesn't take into account that we're constantly improving the efficiencies of these renewable energies, and it certainly doesn't take into account the effect that humans survived on this planet for roughly 12,000 years before we discovered how to use electricity for our own means. So you could take that argument and shove it up your ass.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say, Paul, you know what I'm going to respond with when you say rare earth minerals not being enough of. What am I going to say?
I don't know. Afghanistan?
No. Think farther away.
Oh, space.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to do some space mining?
I always want to bring it back to it's like when
space mining.
I was talking with
space
Paul
mining.
about
So
this.
somebody asked us to line up the moon. Yes, we're talking about the space here.
So
on
again,
media.
it's like I said, climate change is something we got to deal with. But eventually, I think Paul's right about it with this, but eventually we will run out of the minerals we need, and they're all in space. So we got to take care of climate change, and we also got to start prepping for space mining, because that's the future I want to live in.
Just
because
so long as we
get off the planet. We can't live on this planet forever, and we can do both at the same time. Most of the technologies, I mean, half the stuff that you're probably wearing watching this was technology that was created as a byproduct of us going to the moon. So, you know, I just let's do both. We are humans. We can, I mean, literally, we have the ability to stop hunger. We can do all these things if we just choose to. The only thing that we're really arguing about is priorities. And I, for one, want to, in 60 years, talk to people and have them. I want the conversation to be, wow, you guys really gave us a better future. And I don't want the conversation to be, do you remember what beef tastes like? Do you remember what it was like to have coffee, which is going to go extinct eventually, along with chocolate. So that's sad. Already pretty much done.
Yeah,
I think avocados too. We're going to lose some stuff. I mean, there is a price to pay
rubber
for what
trees.
We've done.
Rubber trees going extinct.
Yeah.
Interesting fact about rubber: we cannot synthesize a material that has the same kind of strength and heat resistance for use in tires, particularly for landing planes. We can't synthesize anything as good as rubber.
Interesting.
Wow. All right, guys. So now moving on to another story. Daniel, you're taking point on this one. Tell me about something passing away. What's going on here?
So this I always bring up because it's always interested me the way arguments get made. And this is called the quiet death of the white Bernie bro attack. And I've brought this up, I think, I don't know, in the last few months 4 times. This being the 4th, I believe. So let's get into it. There's a lot to this. The media used to say Bernie Sanders' coalition was too white and male. Now, that's so obviously not true to some people. They should admit why they really hate Bernie, his class politics. Bernie Sanders faced ferocious criticism in the media throughout 2016 primaries, and central to that critique was what the Washington Post called Bernie Sanders' big black voter problem. Black voters were decisively rejected Bernie Sanders' politics and, by extension, left flank challenges to the Democratic establishment, and the proof was in the polls overwhelmingly. Majorities of black voters preferred Hillary Clinton. It's impossible to overstate how much coverage this narrative received in just about every major outlet you can name: the New York Times, the Washington Post, again, Vox, Slate, Time, MSNBC, In These Times, The Atlantic, and so on. In all of these articles, we find variations of the same argument that Joanne Walsh rehearsed in The Nation. Sanders has won whites by crafting a class-based appeal that minimizes and sometimes even diminishes the role that racism plays in creating American social and economic inequality. In 2016, all of these calculations have hurt him with the Democratic base. But in January of this year, it had already become clear that the enthusiasm for another Sanders run was remarkably inflected by race, with comparatively strong support coming from black voters. And Friday, a poll from Pew confirms the trend. Only, this is the important point to remember for when you're talking to people, only 49% of Sanders supporters are white, compared with 56% of Biden supporters, 59% Harris voters, and interestingly enough, which we'll get back to, a remarkable 71% of Warren voters. This explicit, consistently invoked basis for the 2016 critique of Sanders on race, his support among white voters and weak support among black voters, has completely vanished. You remember in 2016 how all we would hear is Bernie Sanders, Bernie bros, white, college, male, chauvinists, pigs. And that was, as I put in 2016, a very relevant thing when it comes to understanding campaigns, because Sanders couldn't possibly win if he had this white base, which even then was questionable. All the polling arguments made against him in 2016 now largely apply to his opponents. So it's interesting, fascinating even, how this important issue that was the reason that you couldn't vote for Sanders is he'll only get white people, now that it's not the case, somehow is irrelevant. Not at all. Doesn't apply to Biden, doesn't apply to Warren. I haven't heard mainstream media talk about those things at all. In fact, the only mainstream outlet that I've heard talk about it is The Hill. Credit to them.
We'll give credit to whoever actually does their job.
I mean, we try to be as honest as we can. So they admit that the preference polls are not actually a sound basis. This is what the article is saying, that they have 2 choices based on these new criteria. They can admit that the preference polls are not actually a sound basis for evaluating a candidate's credibility on the issue, and admit that their reliance on this is to critique Sanders in 2016 and was unfair or misleading. Or they can insist that Bernie Sanders and his policies are legitimized by the demographics of his coalition, and that his opponents and their support are champions of privilege and white supremacy, and they can make these arguments as forcefully and persistently as they did in 2016. In a nutshell, they can either admit that they were lying and didn't actually care what they pretended to care about, they don't care about the black vote at all, or they could admit that Sanders' policies are incredibly popular with minorities, but then they'd have to go along with them now, wouldn't they? Neither, of course, will actually happen. Presumably, some critics of Sanders will continue to live in denial, and we have experienced a few of those people, and pretend that the demographic coalitions of 2016 map directly onto 2019. However, we can probably expect more of what we've already seen, conspicuous signs from critics who never really cared what the polls said either way. So I want to just go very quickly on this, on the irony, because, in the background, we get a lot of people talk to us off air, and there's a few people specifically, but in general, a lot of the time I still hear that Bernie bro argument are from people that support Warren. I'm not saying anything about Warren people. I'm just saying it happens to be that the people I've interacted with, that's been the case. So it's fascinating to me that Sanders is now by far the most diverse coalition, the only non-majority white coalition, and also not majority male. And yet people from Warren's camp, or people that support Warren, and again, I don't want to cast any dispersions on the generalizations. I know some people get on me for generalizing too much. But it's just fascinating that the camp that now has the most white males is still calling the now most diverse camp female majority.
70% of his campaign staff in the leadership position are women.
And so it's like, if there's a Bernie bro, if Bernie bro is white college educated people or males, that's Warren now. I'm just putting it out there. I've been saying for the longest time, I don't think that Bernie bro is useful or helpful in any way, shape, or form, because it was adapted from the slur from Hillary Clinton's 2008 campaign against Obama, which was those thuggish black Obama boys, and they flipped it to Bernie bros, which still has legs. I'm just making the point that news media doesn't care at all whether or not they're being consistent. They don't care at all whether or not, it's just they don't like Bernie Sanders.
No, they're just repeating the same thing, trying to will it to be true. Right?
Yeah,
This is a flaw in human reasoning. If you are presented with a false statement repeatedly, eventually you'll be confronted with that false statement and think, oh, I've heard that before. It must be true.
Okay, so there's another thing, too, I want to bring up before we do move on to Paul's story, and that is, I remember when me and Daniel actually first started off getting involved in media, being involved in YouTube, we went to Philadelphia to cover the DNC convention. And we spoke to members who were delegates and volunteers and supporters of Senator Bernie Sanders' campaign in 2016. And you know what? Majority of the people there were African-American, Latino. It was diverse. And women. It wasn't just straight white males. It was the most diverse group of people I've ever seen before. And his whole narrative, they're still holding on to that ridiculous narrative from 2016 up until now. And look, here's the real fact. Daniel's correct. And that is, Bernie Sanders has a very diverse and very open campaign. He's been consistent with it. And very few candidates can actually match what Senator Bernie Sanders has done. And we have to remember that all this BS, all these hit jobs that's going towards Bernie Sanders, it's a way for the establishment to destroy his credibility. And that's it.
I'll say one super quick thing before the other point of this is the reason they specifically targeted black voters in this is Sanders has consistently, in both campaigns, done phenomenally well with Latino voters. So there's that.
Yeah, so I was talking yesterday, actually, with a friend of mine who is canvassing for Warren and sort of laying out all of our political ideas on the table for this discussion. These exact same talking points came up, and they're so easy to refute. But it's again, to the point I was making earlier, it's like a lie that's been repeated so much that people take it as though it's true. That somehow Bernie is sexist and is anti-woman and he hates minorities and doesn't have any minorities in his campaign and doesn't pay his campaign workers. All of those things are false. Like, all of those things are demonstrably false. And it seems like people are just willing to go along with it because they don't like Bernie. For the biggest thing for a lot of those people, and actually this person in particular, his biggest thing that he would say is, hey, if Bernie gets the nomination, I'm happy. And you should be happy if Warren gets the nomination. But my thing against Bernie is he's just too old. And I think the only thing that matters about that is who his VP pick is. That's the only thing that matters. And the inverse is not true, right? If Warren gets the nom, I'm not happy because I don't trust Warren. She has not proven to be trustworthy. And these type of attacks from Warren supporters, which are not in good faith and demonstrably false, reinforce my position.
Yeah, it's like I was saying to one person who I had a very long-term relationship with until I said basically that Bernie bro is not a good thing to be using. I mean, to the Warren supporters that do use it, again, I really do want to make the clarification again that I don't want to group everyone together. It just applies to the people that it does.
Right.
It's not a good way to engender support is to accost people with attacks that really, if anything, apply to your candidate. I'm just saying it's not a good look, and it's a great way to get people not to vote for your candidate the same way that Hillary Clinton saying she didn't need Bernie Sanders with the DNC, everything of that nature. If you really want to get Bernie supporters, which are a chunk that you're going to need to beat Trump, act like it.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going to be fair. Apply the same thing to Bernie and every other candidate out there. It seems like a universal thing to me. It's why I try we try on the show not to accost people, because who does it help? It just blocks off, just burns bridges. What's the point of that? I like bridges. America needs more bridges.
There we go.
They're all falling apart.
All right. So, Paul, you got another story because we're going
back to the Amazon.
We are?
Yeah.
Oh, boy. What's
Not
going
Jeff
on?
Bezos' Amazon, the real geological one, the real one that exists in Brazil.
If
what's
the
happening,
Amazon
Paul?
burns away, it'll just be Jeff Bezos' Amazon.
I know, it'll be the only one.
No, we don't want that. So what's going
They
on,
have to
Paul?
change the name?
What's going on?
I wanted to draw attention to this particular article that showed up in The Intercept yesterday. And it does a deep dive onto American lobbying firms that are active and working with the Bolsonaro government and with the government in the Amazon to essentially further the destruction of the Amazon rainforest. So there's a group called the Intra-America Group, filed information in packets assembled for U.S. companies on behalf of the Brazilian government, promoting the Amazon region for its development potential. The packet lists mining, agribusiness, and gas chemical industry as opportunities for American businesses. Among the challenges for these potential businesses is to ensure forest conservation. Right? They're not for forest conservation, right? These are conservative, right-wing groups that, while Bolsonaro is busy blaming NGOs for the burning of the Amazon, these are American corporate aligned lobby groups who are trying to forge paths between American business and this particular state or province in Brazil to usurp Amazonian lands, burn off the rainforest, and use that for mining, for cattle herding, for oil, natural gas, and agribusiness. I mean, this is what we're talking about when we talk about the hands of corporate America in every nation, in every country on the planet, trying to get their hands in there and to reap economic reward off of the destruction of the land. So we are coming back to this. This is a story we've already covered even today, and I just wanted to highlight in this particular article some of the finer points of the American involvement with both Bolsonaro and I can't remember the name of the governor of this particular province, but basically the government in Brazil that has any kind of agency to prevent or stop or make better this situation. So it's not just that Bolsonaro, who is a right-winger, a hardline, sort of neoconservative type. It's not just that he enjoys a cozy relationship with Trump, the Trump administration, and GOPers here stateside. He enjoys a very cozy relationship with American corporate class and the American lobbying class. That's an exacerbating factor on this entire story.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly like we really, in the first time we addressed this story, we talked about the actual environmental implications of it. And this, like Paul's bringing up, it's why it happened, the reasoning. And again, it really comes down to they just wanted to maintain a few more points in GDP because this guy goes in, he's far right. And we talked about when he first got elected, and I said, we're very hopeful he doesn't start killing a lot of people because they're not the right group that he likes. And it turns out he just killed the rainforest. So something
and everyone's gonna be impacted by it.
Yeah.
So we're all gonna deal with it.
But it goes to people want that land, and they say, why are trees here? I don't care if they're the lungs of the planet. Let's get rid of them. They're not producing GDP, which again, Andrew Yang talks about really well about how that's not even a useful measurement for a whole host of reasons. But we've plugged our entire world economies to this idea that wasn't that good to begin with, and it's amazing what humans can do with the right incentive structure. We can take something that has existed for 55 million years, and because we can make a little extra money making it into cattle fields or whatever, so that Bolsonaro, who's unpopular, can maintain his popularity. This is happening so that he can follow rule one of being a corrupt politician, getting reelected. That's all this is. And this is the consequence. It's crazy, but it is a obvious inputs, obvious outputs kind of situation. And especially since the U.S. has no leadership role anymore. Trump, it used to be at the U.S., someone would do that, the U.S. would go cut that out, and they would work together with a bunch of countries. Like, as much as, we have our issues with Obama, I'm confident Obama would put a coalition together to do something about the rainforest being burned away. But Trump doesn't think. Trump thinks that it's in Brazil's borders. Who cares? And no one else has that role. China's not quite strong enough to assert themselves in that way. So this was inevitable to a degree with the current situation.
Mm-hmm. Again, there's going to be a point where if this continues to happen, eventually people will wonder, well, we destroyed the planet just so that we can earn a few dollars in profit. Future generations will look at us and wonder why we didn't fight for it when we had the chance. And you know what? You mentioned earlier in the show, Daniel, about how people could potentially have the conversation of, hey, do you remember what a steak tastes like, or having a cup of coffee? And that is a real reality. And these corporations don't care about their impact on our society. And if it's all about greed will consume us all.
So this particular lobbyist, Pierce, wrote in a 2017 blog post that is on his company's website that under President Trump, Brazil stands to become, quote, a world leader in industries such as agribusiness, mining, banking, and aviation. In a more recent post, Pierce celebrates the rise of right-wing Bolsonaro, declaring, quote, Donald Trump paved the way for a Bolsonaro victory. This is basically like saying, hey, Brazil's open for business. Let's just go do what we need to do, burn down the rainforest, do our agribusiness, make our money, get out. They're saying that 2/5 of the rainforest will be gone by the end of the year.
And here's something that's crazy on top of that. 10 or 20 years, however long it takes, that's going to be like a desert almost. It's going to be a desert-like area that was once. And so they're already, like, one other thing that they talked about with Brazil is Brazil doesn't ever get droughts. Like, droughts in Brazil are like once in a century occurrences. And I think in the last like 20 years, there have been 4 droughts. So guess what's going to happen, Brazil? You're going to cut down the forest, and then you're going to be a desert, and then you're going to have encroachment. And what happened to the Sahara? People don't know this. The Sahara Desert used to be pretty damn lush. Then some water currents changed, some rivers changed around, and now it's not. So if you go just on the other side of the Andes Mountains, what do you get? You get the Atacama Desert. So if you take away that rainforest, which is artificially, I mean, I guess naturally, but artificially keeping that area moist and attracting rainfall because of all the water that it's attracting, because the trees are a lot of water, and it's a rainforest, well, obvious inputs, obvious outputs. It's going to not be a great place to farm a place that's a desert.
Yeah, I even think that...
But hell... The corporate quarterly profits were pretty good for a few years.
I just do not understand climate denialism and how this is being celebrated. Oh, look, they're open for business. We get to burn all this stuff down. Climate crisis isn't real. There isn't really climate change. Putting carbon into the atmosphere doesn't matter. Humans can't make this happen. It's like, what world are you living in where you can believe that that's true? And it's like that comic that I always mention when we talk about climate things. It's a list of all of these things that we would have to do to try to combat climate change, and it's things like renewable resources and not putting as much carbon into the air, and all of these things that ultimately make our society better anyway. And there's a guy in the back of the room in this comic that says, but what if it's all fake and we make a better planet for nothing? Well, then we made a better planet.
We did.
And then we can space mine. Again, I'm just putting it out there.
I still... we've talked about this before, but I still am of the opinion that if space mining ever happens, we're not bringing those minerals back to the Earth, right? We're using those minerals to further space exploration.
We're bringing them back.
That's way too much energy to send a rocket up to bring... How much material would we have to bring back to make it worth it?
You got to set up a lot of infrastructure. I'm sure someone smarter than me has figured it out. but I'm sure you could just drop it not at terminal velocity somehow.
I'm going to
just
focus
saying,
on saving the rainforest before I get into space mining.
I think we could do both. I think the rainforest needs to be safe now, but we also have to keep planning. I'm talking about something that's going to happen if it happens soon, the fastest in like 50 years, but I'm big on this.
Yeah. Here's hoping that.
So I'm just.
Oh well, here's
just
hoping
being true to myself, being transparent.
Well, here's hoping that there is a human society capable of doing something like that, because climate change and super hurricanes, polar vortexes, droughts, massive fires can't have the final word, because after all, we're living on this planet, but Mother Nature is the real master of it.
I think I can go with that as well. Yeah, again, like we have to survive. Global warming has to be fixed before space mining goes into effect. So I'm just saying that both are going to be needed for very much similar reasons.
Yeah.
We'll fight each other with climate change. If we don't fix it, we will fight each other to death over water. If we fix climate change, we will then eventually fight each other over rare earth minerals.
Absolutely.
So
now, moving on to another story that I'm excited to talk about. It's Tulsi time.
Oh, that was a new one.
Graphic.
No. All right. So, anyways, so we talked about this last Saturday's show about Tulsi Gabbard potentially making on the debate stage, and as it stands right now, Representative Tulsi Gabbard and Tom Steyer are getting closer to qualifying to be on the debate stage. Now, it should be noted that both Tom Steyer and Representative Tulsi Gabbard have met the individual donors to make it on the debate stage, and now Tulsi Gabbard has just successfully passed 2% to qualify in the second poll, and she just needs 2 more polls and 2 different surveys to basically qualify to be on the third debate stage. The people who have made it up there so far are Senator Bernie Sanders, Vice President Joe Biden, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Senator Kamala Harris, Senator Cory Booker, Senator Amy Klobuchar, former Representative Beto O'Rourke, Andrew Yang, former Housing and Urban Development Secretary Julian Castro, and South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg. So I'm really excited about this. This really kind of gives me hope for Representative Tulsi Gabbard to be on the debate stage. I feel that her voice and presence is something that's desperately needed. Already in the first and second debate stages, she really stood out and really made her voice heard. Now, of course, it's very important to remember that Senator Bernie Sanders said on Joe Rogan's show that these debates are demeaning, and all the candidates are given very short amount of time to really make their talking points stand. And Tulsi Gabbard made her talking points really stand out, especially how she went after Kamala Harris and basically kind of destroyed Kamala Harris's quote-unquote invulnerability. And
we have a video where you can literally see the moment that happens and all our reactions. Oh, it's glorious.
Yeah, it's glorious and it's beautiful. And I think I'm hoping that Representative Tulsi Gabbard will succeed in 2 other polls, but this kind of gives me hope. I feel that her presence as a progressive and someone who has a very strong foreign policy will actually make it on the debate stage and potentially go on afterwards. I think that she is a wild card in this race, and I think she's somebody that Senator Bernie Sanders could use, especially going on into the primary, as a potential ally. So, Paul, Daniel, I want to open this floor up to you guys about Representative Tulsi Gabbard and really just how this entire system in which candidates are polled make it onto the debate stage. So let's talk.
So Michael Bennett is also on that list of people who is lobbying the DNC to include more polls.
Yeah.
But in my calculation, my opinion, I don't have the hard numbers, but it appears as though Tom Steyer and Michael Bennett are more or less buying their way in. I don't think that they really.
Paul, are you insinuating that the DNC
billionaire can just waltz into the Democratic Party?
No, I don't believe it. The DNC would never stoop so low.
I did tweet this out earlier today. I found it on Tulsi's website, which she was talking about this particular issue, and it's a quote from Michael Tracy. I'm a Michael Tracy fan, if you don't know. He says, Tulsi Gabbard is on the verge of being excluded from the next Democratic presidential debate on the basis of criteria that appear increasingly absurd. And he's right. The fact that between I forget what was it? Between the first and second debate, 14 different polls came out. Between the second and third debate, so far we only have 4 polls that have come out. Tulsi needs polls that say that she meets that 2% threshold, and even fact-finding websites that calculate, that go over polls and talk about how valid they are, what their methodology is, rate plenty of polls that she is coming in at higher than 2% as more valid and more trustworthy than the polls that are certified. There are 26 different polls where she exceeds 2%, and the DNC is only recognizing 2 of them. It's hard to view this as anything other than the Democratic Party picking favorites. It's hard to make any rational argument that says, yeah, these people should be excluded because these particular certified polls, which aren't as scientific as the ones that aren't certified, are the ones that we like, because why again? It's a bunch of BS. Tulsi should be on that stage. Tom Steyer should probably go home.
Yeah, and also, I just want to make a quick statement as well, because a few other independent media outlets covered this, and there's been a few articles as well. Representative Tulsi Gabbard and her campaign has actually called out the DNC establishment in regards to how unfair the debate qualifications are. Look, we got to remember that Mike Gravel actually met the individual donors to be on the debate stage for the second night in Detroit,
and was still excluded.
But he was still excluded from those debates, and I feel like his presence should have been heard. He met the qualifications. Now, Representative Tulsi Gabbard, she has a strong progressive message. She has a strong presence on social media. She has withstood the ridiculous attacks by corporate media. She has the ability to build a strong coalition of people on the left and on the right to support her cause. If you just check out her interviews, 2 of her interviews on Joe Rogan, Jimmy Dore, Mika Sukasa, Michael Tracy, Jordan Sheridan, then there's who else? Glenn Greenwald, and numerous other people that have been interviewed by Representative Tulsi Gabbard. You can see that the way corporate media has been painting her is completely wrong. They're calling her an Assad apologist and a Putin apologist, but that's not true. It's fake. Representative Tulsi Gabbard, as soon as she entered into this race, was automatically attacked by corporate media. And now, finally, she's very close to qualifying in a few other polls, but her entire qualification, she's met those qualifications. She has what it takes, and she has withstood so much criticism that she has definitely more, in my opinion, earned her spot for the 3rd debate night. And the very fact that she could be potentially excluded could be really devastating for the American people, because we need to know who our politicians are and who will be the people who will actually fight for us. And she has what it takes. So, I really hope that she's able to make it up there. I have some hope, but there is a very real and sad possibility that Representative Tulsi Gabbard could not make it on the debate stage. And I don't want that to happen. I want to see her there. I want to see her actually talk about her policies and actually take down some of these neoliberal candidates. I want to see her actually make an impact and a change. And we all should be upset just how the DNC is just rigging these debate qualifications. So
as upset as we get about that, the politics around just getting on the debate stage, we also, when we cover the debates, we talk about the fact that they are pretty much, it's political pageantry, right? Candidates get, 30 seconds or so to try to make a quippy, snappy little one-liner that can somehow stick in people's minds for a little while, but don't really have adequate time to thoughtfully explain their positions. I'm seeing it in the chat here, and I've actually seen comments on Twitter as well, people saying that if Tulsi gets snubbed from this 3rd debate, that she should get all of the other candidates who should have been on this debate also, and get them together and go on Joe Rogan and hash it out. Yeah. That would actually give you plenty of time to talk about your policy ideas.
I'd love to get more people on Joe Rogan.
Yeah. And, the very fact that he got some very prolific characters like Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Tulsi Gabbard and Andrew Yang on the show says a lot about these individuals and their campaigns. And the very fact that they're very aware that social media and media itself has changed, and they're willing to introduce themselves to a wide audience. All right? And it's important that we understand who our politicians are. Again, I feel personally that Representative Tulsi Gabbard should be on the 3rd debate night. She should be there on the stage with all the other candidates. She has what it takes. She's, in my opinion, already met the qualifications. So here's hope and all the best for her and her campaign to actually go on. And I don't want to prepare myself for the possibility of not seeing her again, because I think that she is desperately needed for progressives and independents to make a real change in this 2020 primary. Paul, you have the final story.
All right. You know who we don't do lots of stories about here? We don't talk about incessantly?
Trump.
We don't talk about Trump all that much. can't go 10 minutes on mainstream news without, oh my God, did you see what Trump tweeted? But I wanted to draw attention to this. This is an article from TruthDig. It is an opinion piece. It's not super detailed, but it says it all in the headline. Donald Trump is coming for Medicare and for Social Security. This is not news to anyone, but in a time where we're talking about Medicare for all in the Democratic primaries, in a time when we're talking about expanding Social Security and acknowledging that these two things, Medicare and Social Security, two things that came out of the New Deal, are some of the most, if not the most popular government programs. Social Security in and of itself, people talk about it as though, how are we going to pay for it? How are we going to pay for it? This is, coming from taxes, etc. It's our money, right? That's a program that we pay into, and it earns us dividends when we retire. That's how it works. You pay it when you pay your payroll taxes. These are the kind of things that are on the chopping block now that Trump has had 2 rounds of tax cuts that he really wanted. And they get to go with this, the fiscal conservative, for every program that we're going to do, we have to cut something. But Republicans tend to go with we just want to cut stuff because, oh my God, the budget, the debt, the national debt is so high, we have to cut. We have money for our good humanitarian bonds, but we definitely don't have money for your mom's health care. We don't have money for your dad's retirement. We don't have money for the things that go to the people of this country. We only have money for the things that go to the people of other countries in the form of bombs.
Yeah. Destroy everything.
We have money for the military-industrial complex, the Joint Strike Fighter, and a $200 million drone that was shot down in Iranian airspace by a much more cheaper rocket. Yeah. Guys, listen, what are you asking for? You're asking for Medicare for all? Mm-hmm. You're asking for a real infrastructure program? You're asking for green technologies? You're asking to deal with student debt forgiveness? I mean, Paul, that is a bar too high.
Hey, but
you're
you know what?
Far too much, okay?
We have these wonderful tax cuts for our friends in business. It's going to cost $1.5 trillion. And you know who's going to have to pay for that?
Ooh. Poor people.
Oh, that means you
got the poor people. They're going to have to pay for it.
Oh, well, yeah, if you're not... Yeah, we're not talking about all of the poor people, just sort of, the bottom 340 million Americans.
Oh,
those
okay.
poor people.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not good. Mm-hmm. That's not good at all. In fact, it's it says a lot about Trump and his administration. I mean, look, it's clear as day. We all know who Trump is. He's up front with his BS. We know how he views people who are not part of his social class. And dealing with Trump, you need to have a strong progressive to take him out. You need a strong progressive candidate who can build a large coalition. And in my own personal opinion, Senator Bernie Sanders, of all the candidates, has what it takes to defeat President Donald Trump and going on to actually reversing a lot of Trump's policies. We need to get money out of politics. We need to get rid of Citizens United and McCutcheon's decision. We have to stand up and we have to get involved. Otherwise, yeah, there could be a second term of Trump. And guess what's going to happen? The same BS that we were dealing with in these 4 years as well. That's why we got to fight for a better future. So with that being said, I want to read a real quick live stream chat. M. Oss says, go on Rogan or on Hard Lens Media. Thank you so much. We actually have reached out to the Andrew Yang campaign, Senator Bernie Sanders campaign, and Representative Tulsi Gabbard campaign to be on our show. Please be on our show. We'd like to interview you guys. So I want to make it very clear that we really are very grateful for all our viewers and subscribers for helping us out. You guys are really helping us build this channel up. We can't thank you enough for all your support. Just make sure you're subscribed. Hit that ring bell notification. We have a major announcement coming out very shortly. Daniel, do you want to go any more details about it?
I think we're good.
All right. So, all right. More importantly, just make sure you're subscribed because there's a lot of stuff that we're trying to do to make it happen, and it's a major announcement. So if you really want to help out Hard Lens Media, though, please consider being a Patreon supporter. You guys are the main heart and backbone to everything that we do here. And I want to read a list of all of our subscribers. Thank our Patreon supporters because you guys are helping us out, getting onto our goal, and that's creating a real powerful, independent, progressive media network here in the city of Chicago and the Midwest. So shout out to Carlos Lazario, Cassie Lloyd, Myra Alejandra Sanchez, Ishmael Rufus, Chase, Gregory Church, Kate, Kira McCown, Sandra N. Grayson, NC Shafter, Anthony Nelson, Teresa Collins, Brittany Cabrera, Desmond Turek, Jack Moore, Sandra Mayer, Gippy, Lewis, Ariana Hinson, Denise Gibson, Emmy, Michael Ealing, Unknown, Space Pioneer, Eric Unger, Freethinker59, Todd Adams, Ellen Marone, Carrie Barber, Ashwin Rufkumar, Mike Concho, Renacue, Jeff, Fred Edward, Jeff Gwinny, Susan Singer, Deanne, Ramon Lazo, Savut Ted, Kai Arnold, Brian Thomas, Dimitri N, Walu Damuni, Akbesh Akita, Carl Espud, Jack Papura, Maya Jones, and Yutais. Thank you all so much, and a special shout out to our infamous rogue trader, Wesley Wiles, who's helping us be introduced to many congressional candidates all across the country who are running in this 2020 election cycle. You guys help us out so much. We want to make a real professional studio and something here in the city of Chicago and the Midwest, and that's make real, consistent, quality content and cover stories that corporate media will not cover. With that being said, I'm Kit Cabello. I want to thank all our viewers and subscribers. I want to give a huge shout out to Paul DuPont, Daniel Lubker for joining us here. Peace, everyone. And let's all do what we can to build a better future.